Page 44. The memory is situated in the cerebrum. What is likely to be scientifically proven is that the cells of the cerebral cortex are responsible, in special form, for the preservation of conscious memory contents, whereas the hippocampus, one of the evolutionary oldest parts of the cerebrum, is determinatively responsible for the transfer of all information from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. If the hippocampus becomes injured or destroyed, then the reception and storage become gravely affected or even absolutely impossible. If one or several parts of the cerebral cortex, i.e., the surface area of the cerebrum, become injured or destroyed, then it is the case that the memory, due to the suffered injury, becomes hazier and more inaccurate, deficient, and erratic, or even entirely unusable. A case, however, that can never take place if no injury or destruction occurs to the surface area of the cerebrum. Otherwise, a memory dulling can only occur if the material consciousness sends out rubbish and hardship, through which the communication with the memory can no longer occur, as previously explained. With any injury or destruction of the surface area of the cerebrum, the memory contents become simply erased, in which case these contents, however, cannot be described exactly, because it cannot become determined, at least up until now, which cerebral cortex parts house which information. The memory is not only a factor that becomes carried by the cerebral cortex, because still very many nerve cells and their synapses additionally play a determining role. Knowing about this, the lexicographers report the following. The memory also has to be seen as a process, simultaneously carried by many nerve cells and their synapses. Thereby, the preservation appears to function similarly to that of a hologram. The information becomes stored through overlapping, or interference, of two or more information circles, e.g., through overlapping of what is seen with what is heard, of what is read with what is already known, etc. This theory explains why learning comes easier when several, quote, input channels participate at the same time, or these input channels become equated to the senses by the scientists. N.B. Billy. As well, repetitions would accentuate the, quote, hologram and make the memory content more easily retrievable. Hereby, the attention represents a filter, so to speak, which allows only the stimuli that belong to that currently under consideration. The hypothesis that electrical occurrences of the ultra-short memory would cause genotype substance, or DNA, to create carrier substance, or RNA, and to synthesize proteins according to their regulation, likewise explains the effect of repetitions during learning, or, in so doing, even considerably more protein is being built. However, at the same time, it explains that specific behavior and also memory content can be bequeathed by the DNA. A different hypothesis assumes that during the learning, specific nerve cells are being linked by especially good conducting nerve connections or new synapses and, e.g., repetitions, quote, wear in these pathways, so to speak. In any case, memory contents leave traces in the brain, or engrams. The process running contrary to the memory is the forgetting. However, this process is still fully unclear, in which case, however, it is certain that contents of the long-term memory cannot always be recalled into the consciousness. During hypnosis, however, often already, quote, forgotten memory contents can still be retrievable. This is the extent that the lexicographers have also precisely pointed out that the present-day science still has very many things to fathom, and many secrets have not yet come to the fore. With it, the quote forgetting is specifically addressed, which the scientists to this day still have not been able to fathom, although the solution for it is so simple, namely, that the rubbish and debris, as well as the hardship, etc., of the material consciousness are therefore accountable, as has already been explained. That also solves the mystery that was stated with the words, "The process running contrary to the memory is the forgetting. However, this process is still fully unclear, in which case, however, it is certain that contents of the long-term memory cannot always be recalled into the consciousness. During hypnosis, however, often already quote forgotten memory contents can still be retrievable." Hence, the quote forgotten, contrary to any negating theory that this simply remains quote forgotten, is therefore yet still retrievable. That means that what was once quote forgotten will or can become released again from the memory as remembrance to the consciousness if distinct circumstances occur. The solution for this is quite simple. If the debris, the hardship and the rubbish, and everything else burdening the material consciousness becomes removed, destroyed, and eliminated from it, then the communication between the material consciousness and the memory also functions again, and indeed to the degree to which the consciousness has become freed of its burden and hindrance. If the consciousness is no longer burdened by rubbish, poison, debris, and hardship, or by other terrible things, like sorrow and worry, as well as other things, then it can again communicate with the memory, which then also practically, automatically, again releases, quote, the already long forgotten. In truth, it is that simple, that in order to recognize a fact, in no wise must one be scientifically educated, as many of the, quote, intellectuals presume, unfortunately. However, there is now still one point to be addressed, of which until now still no word has been spoken of, and indeed the inheritability of the memory. The inheritability refers thereupon that through the procreation of descendants, based on distinct processes that unfortunately cannot be explained here, heredity of memory impulses also occur. That is also the reason that descendants often have information in their memory at their disposal which previously only existed in their parents, and that belongs as well in the maternal as also in the paternal realm. Thus it occurs that descendants have memory information at their disposal that in no wise springs forth from one of their own perception realms of any kind, but rather from the biological father or from the biological mother. A word still must also be said about the retentiveness of the human being, which can be very different from one to another. The quality of the memory is built upon the retentiveness of the particular life form and is individual, thus very different. Primarily, the retentiveness of the human being depends on how intensely his or her concentration is oriented on a perception of any form. The greater the concentrative attention is, the more pronounced is the retentiveness, because through the concentration and attention, the quantity and the quality become determined, which, as information, reaches the memory, and with how much power it is stored there, as either a process and factor of the ultra-short-term memory, or of the short-term memory, or of the long-term memory. With the concentration, i.e., heedfulness, the prevailing condition of the human being naturally plays a very great role, so namely, e.g., whether he or she is superficial or well-balanced, pedantic or disinterested, etc. The prevailing condition also plays a determining role as, e.g., the degree of tiredness, involvement of feelings, empathy and living with others, peacefulness, aggressiveness, the inner and outer tranquility, as well as many other accompanying circumstances that speak either for or against the interest of the imprinted information in the memory. However, there is still the quote, form of the imprinting, which is highly significant. Regarding this, there are various forms of types to differentiate. There is the auditory or oral type. Oral is A-U-R-A-L, who can concentrate better on something heard and consequently can better remember such matters. The visual type, quote, specialises in something seen, and the feeling-based type responds more readily to feeling perceptions, while others are responsive to imagination or to touch or sense and odors, etc., through which their retentiveness is simply characterized accordingly. With the human beings, the highest absorption speed prevails during the school age, whereas the highest absorption accuracy lies between the ages of 20 to 25. In the course of the aging process, absorption speed and absorption accuracy decline, which not lastly stands in direct connection with the diminishing cell renewal, and so therefore with the aging process. Of the animals, or other than the mesozoa, the few-celled organisms and the sponges, all multi-celled animals have a memory. In the investigation of the memory, in addition to psychologists, doctors, biologists, biochemists, and cyberneticists, scientists of many other fields are also involved, through which their research methods are extremely different. From the present-day psychology, in addition to the actual, quote, occurrence memory, the conditions which influence the registration and remembering are quite particularly investigated. Under the informational theoretical aspect, the memory becomes construed as storage with a restricted absorption capacity. In this form it should work as a selector, or choosing of the perceived and learned, and as a modifier, or changing the contents according to subjective as well as structural principles. When it is stated that the quality of the memory is built upon the retentiveness of a particular life form, then this retentiveness is not only shaped by how intensely the concentration is oriented on a perception of any kind, but rather the evolutionary level also, in determining form, plays an extremely important role. But that in turn means that rationality and intellect, as well as the entire ratio on the whole, are also evolved, that is, in lower or higher form. Again, the ratio is imprinted by the development state of the material consciousness, through which factors, therefore, are intertwined and connected with each other. Regarding the retentiveness, and therefore the quality of the memory, it becomes clear and comprehensible that a life form with a lower evolutionary level exhibits a lesser capability for the memory storage than is the case with a higher evolutionary individual. A human being with a lesser total evolution is therefore not able to make use of and display the same high memory qualities as is the case for a human being which lives on a high evolutionary level. Naturally, particularly pronounced memory qualities can occur, e.g., in a human being and an animal, even if the particular life form still lives on an, quote, under-evolved evolutionary level, or has a consciousness-based injury. But these particularly pronounced memory qualities then exhibit acutely specific forms. That means that such particularly pronounced memory qualities are oriented on a special area and are only able to move within it. Thereby it can happen that a consciousness-injured or a consciousness-based, still lacking human being exhibits a perfect photographic memory, or is a mathematical genius beyond compare, with whom no computer can compete. The basis for this fact is that the life form concerned, despite his or her consciousness-based handicap, limitation, injury, or underdevelopment, etc., has still highly evolved in a consciousness-based manner in a specialized area, perhaps simply much higher than normal, which is why everything else was unfavorably influenced, through which the total evolution had to suffer and be hindered because of it.